I was 13 years old when a police car pulled up in front of my house and changed my life forever. For that year previously, I had been babysitting the two boys across the street every day after school. But this night, their mom was placed in handcuffs, put in the back of a police car, and driven away into the night. And in just one moment, these boys were left without a mother. And they were devastated, and as their world fell apart, my heart broke with them. I continued to watch them every day for the next 2 years after school, and their dad worked really hard, and he provided as a single father. And I witnessed the heartbreak that happens when a family is torn apart. Because I'm so passionate about foster care and adoptions, sometimes people will assume that I'm adopted, or they'll try to ask me, so have you been in foster care? But the reality is, I had an intact family, but I witnessed firsthand, right across the street, what happens when a family's disrupted due to drugs or incarceration. By my sophomore year of high school, I knew that I wanted to be a part of the solution. I wanted to be a social worker. So I did my senior paper on the foster care system, but basically highlighting the brokenness in the system. So every time a child was hurt, every time a child was failed by the system or fell through the cracks, I highlighted it. But I was so focused on the problem that I couldn't see the solution. But today I am convinced not only that there is a solution, but that you don't have to be a foster family or a social worker to be a part of it. Nationwide, in the United States, there are over 400,000 kids in foster care at any given moment, according to Children's Rights. So that's 400,000 kids whose parents, they're not able to take care of them. So somebody outside of their immediate family has to provide a home for them. California has the highest amount of kids in care in the nation. The greater Sacramento region, according to Child Welfare, has just under 3,000 kids in care. So to put that into context, that's about the population of 6 elementary schools. So we are in a crisis, but nobody is talking about it. And when we work to solve issues of this magnitude, we will often form our strategies around systems and funding. And while well-meaning, more money and better systems are not the solution. We are the solution. You and I and every person listening to the sound of this, we are the solution. But before you completely check out, I'm not asking you to foster, and I'm not asking you to adopt. But what I'm asking is that each one of us would use what's already in our hands, our time, our talent, and our resources, and that we would leverage them towards the vulnerable kids and families in our communities. The overwhelming narrative surrounding foster care has always been one of lack. Too many kids and never enough homes. But the reality is we have everything that we need to have more than enough families for every child and support for every family. Group homes and orphanages have met a need in the past, but they fall short of producing lasting healing from trauma. Real healing happens in real families, in real homes, and in real relationships. I've heard it said what's broken in relationship is healed in relationship. So we can't expect institutions to heal the pain that humans have caused. So let me ask you, do you remember what you were doing for your 18th birthday? Maybe you were heading off to college or launching into a new life. But for some, 18 is a death sentence. For some at 18, the thoughts in their mind are, where am I going for Christmas? Or Thanksgiving? Who do I call when my tire blows out on the freeway? Who is my emergency contact? See, when we look at sex trafficking, drug addiction, incarceration, the direct correlation to foster care is undeniable. Every year in the United States, according to the National Foster Youth Institute, 23,000 youth will age out of our foster care system around the country. That's annually. Aging out, meaning they no longer have the resources and the relationships that the state provides. These youth are in dire circumstances. And you might think that you've never met an aged out foster youth, but I would challenge us to look at the fabric of our community and how this plays out, because I think that we all have. Picture with me that young man who's standing at the intersection, holding a sign, and based on his appearance, you can guess that he's living on these streets. His sign says that he's hungry. But what his sign doesn't say is that at 18, he aged out of our foster care system, and he immediately ended up homeless. According to the National Foster Youth Institute, 20% who age out at 18 will instantly end up homeless. Or maybe you've seen that young girl who's down by the bus stop and she's with a guy who's old enough to be her dad, but it's clear that he's not, and you're just thinking, like, there's something fishy happening. What's going on down here? Like, what is going on? For her, it's 60% of domestic trafficking victims share her history in the child welfare system, according to Children's Rights. Or maybe you've seen that guy who's down at the park most days, and he's sitting on a bench, and he's got track marks in his arms, empty bottle underneath him, and he's looking for his next fix. He's in maybe his upper 30s. And for this man, it's been 20 years, and he still can't kick the habit. According to the National Foster Youth Institute, 50% of youth who age out at 18 will develop an addiction. You see, while we value our independence, we are far more interconnected than we acknowledge. And if we're going to fix a systemic issue like this, we have to leverage our connectedness and rise up together. A community issue is only going to be solved by a community movement. So what I'm suggesting as we reimagine foster care is that we, community members, you and I, and community service organizations, that we use what's already in our hands, our time, our talent, and our resources, and that we leverage it towards the vulnerable kids and families in our communities and your community, because what's in your hands has the power to change the world. And this isn't just a pipe dream. We're already seeing this happen. I have watched as community service organizations have leveraged their resources and gotten gift cards for foster youth. So while they have no control over where they lay their head at night, they can have some control over what they wear to school the next day. I've seen a community member leverage her influence and her ability to post on social media to rally her community around 2 youth who aged out to fully furnish an apartment. So they didn't just have a bed when they moved in. No, they had food in the fridge. They had toilet paper. They had a hanging on the wall. They had a home. I've watched a woman who loves to cook leverage her passion and her kitchen to make meals for a foster family who's barely keeping their head on straight. I've seen churches leverage their volunteers in their rooms to have respite nights for foster families so they can drop their kids off for a few hours and reconnect, have a date night. I've seen businesses leverage their profits and give a percentage of every item sold to meet the needs of foster youth in the region. I've seen a financial advisor leverage his skills to train foster youth in finances so that when they're independent, they can actually make great financial decisions. I've seen a pizza parlor leverage their pizza and just give discounts to foster families so they feel seen, known, and supported by their community. A study out of San Bernardino State showed that almost half of all foster families quit in the first year. They just burn out. There's no denying that foster care has its challenges, but with the right support and with the right community, I believe that the families, they can maintain. And as they do, I believe that there are some who are supporting them, and maybe not all, but some will say, hey, with that kind of support and with that kind of community, maybe I could foster. Maybe I could foster too. Oxford did a study in 2012 on motives for foster care, like why do people even foster in the first place? And they found what I call basically the law of proximity. People foster because they know or have known somebody who fostered. So billboard recruitment alone is not enough, but an invitation from a family who is winning in a difficult endeavor, but because they didn't have to do it alone, changes everything. And this moves us from the system is broken, or the kids are broken, to my heart is broken. At 13, that proximity changed everything for me. It doesn't just create sustainability for the family, but it's an invitation to love. It's an invitation to change. It's an invitation to reimagine. And we're already seeing this happen the way that when they're exposed, they're drawn in. For example, there's Rachel and Logan. Rachel in high school played volleyball, and her coach would have them get a backpack and a teddy bear for a local foster agency as like a serve project. So they would drop it off every year. And then she met and married Logan in her early 20s, and then they began, after a year or two, discussing building a family. And so foster care was always in the back of her mind. So she talked to him about fostering. So they decided they would get certified, they would foster. That year they had 8 little ones running through their home. And this isn't everyone's story, but this is what was in their hands. They just finalized adoption on 3 little boys, but they didn't do it alone. They had a community around them, but for them it started with a backpack. And then there's my friend Shaylee. Shaylee is a single foster mom. And for her, it's kind of in their family's DNA to foster, so I think it was less a question of if she would and more a question of who's coming with me, because she couldn't do it alone. She would need a community around them, somebody who would actually bring meals when she took in a sibling set of 3, somebody who would babysit for her, somebody who would bring a car seat when she picked up a baby out of the NICU. Somebody actually paid to have her house cleaned every month. Like, all of these things are seemingly insignificant on their own, but they provided a foundation for Shaylee to care for our kids. And I say our kids intentionally because in all of this, we cannot forget that this is our community and that these are our kids. Earlier, I gave a statistic of 23,000 that age out, and it can sound devastating, but I want to say that there is hope. Harvard did a study in 2015 on resilience in kids, and they found the single greatest predictor of success in a child's life is the presence of one stable and loving adult. Just one. And I want to paint another picture. I want to tell you about Stephanie. Stephanie entered foster care at 9 years old with her brother, her older brother, and her 3 younger siblings. So a set of 5. And unfortunately, sibling sets that big are often separated, and they were. So her and her brother went to one home for 5 years. That was not a great home. And that was discovered. They were moved to a home that was stable. But it was the home of Bob and Ellen that she entered at 18 years old with 4 months left in high school that would change everything for her. This home, they just pursued her with love. And she admittedly pushed back on the love. And you can imagine at 18, she just wanted to get out of high school, right? She just wanted to get out, but they just kept pursuing her with love. And then she got into college. She stayed in the dorms. And every Friday, somebody from their family would pick her up in these dorms, take her home for the weekend, drop her off on Monday. Every weekend. They never forgot about Stephanie. At 22, they said, "Stephanie, you've always been family, but we would love to make it official. Can we adopt you?" And in her words, she said, "I finally just surrendered to love, and it changed everything." At 23, she was asked to speak at her commencement where she graduated, and she shared her story of hope and resilience. Her degree was in social work, and she now works with at-risk youth, sharing with them that there's a hope and a future for them. Stephanie defied the odds because somebody stepped in and said, "You are not alone." Bob and Ellen stepped in for more than Stephanie over the years. They had 40 kids in their home over the years, 6 of whom they adopted. And I'm not saying everybody needs 40 kids in their home, but this is what they had in their hands. But when I asked Bob, "How did you do it? How did you do that?" He told me about his community. For them, it was their church. He said they brought us food, they brought us diapers and clothes and car seats. They babysat for us. He said, but most of all, it was their friendship that strengthened us. That night, in front of my house, when I watched the world shift for one family, my world shifted also because we don't live in a vacuum. So our lives directly influence the lives around us, and they are intended to. That's what community is. And for years, I wrestled with the problem, and it's only recently that I see the solution. We have families who are fighting for kids, and they are burning out. But what we need is a community who will fight for families who are fighting for kids. When I reimagine foster care, I see each one of us using what's already in our hands, and as a result, I see more kids in loving and stable homes becoming adults who are equipped to thrive. And because of that, our streets look different. Less are ending up in homeless shelters and drug rehabs and prisons. Less are aging out and being trafficked. Can you see that? Like, because you're even listening to this, I believe you care about your community. But so often, we just don't know what our role is. But let me ask you, what's in your hands? Is it the ability to be a friend? Is it finances? Is it a specific talent or gift? Is it access to resources? Or the wisdom and the time to mentor? Because what is in your hands has the potential to change the world. Because our world is built on communities, and communities are built on families. And when families are healthy and strong, our world looks different. So often when we think about foster care, it feels like the problem is so big and we feel so small, but I'm here to say that this is not hopeless, and we are not helpless because we each have something in our hands. Somebody listening will adopt 6 kids, and somebody will deliver a meal. And each one of us are part of the solution. So let me ask you, what's in your hands?